For 22 years, a woman named Carmen Vega had carried a photograph in the inner pocket of every purse she had ever owned. A hospital photograph, the kind taken in the first hours of a newborn's life, slightly overexposed at the edges. The baby's face turned 3/4 toward the camera, with the unfocused, ancient expression of someone who has just arrived somewhere and has not yet decided what to make of it. Carmen's adoptive mother, Rosa, had given her the photograph on her 18th birthday, pressing it into her hands with the explanation that it had come with Carmen from the hospital, and that she had kept it all these years because she thought Carmen should have it. Carmen had looked at it and felt something she could not name. Not recognition exactly, because infants do not recognize their own infant faces, but something in the neighborhood of recognition, a proximity to a feeling she could not close the final distance to. She had put it in her purse. She had carried it for 22 years. She had taken it out, maybe twice a year, and looked at it for a few minutes, and put it back. She had shown it to 2 people in her life. Her husband Marco, who had said you were a beautiful baby, and her best friend Luz, who had said the same thing. Neither of them had said what Carmen had always half suspected but never let herself complete, that there was something in the photograph that wasn't quite right. Something about the angle. Something about the light. Something that made her feel, every time she looked at it, that she was looking at herself from a distance she couldn't measure. On the afternoon of October 17th, 2022, Carmen Vega walked onto the Family Feud stage in Atlanta and looked across the set at a woman named Elena Marsh, a 38-year-old middle school science teacher from Savannah, Georgia, who was standing on the opposing team's side in a green blazer with her hair pulled back, and felt the floor of the world give way beneath her. Because Elena Marsh's face was the face in the photograph. Not similar. Not reminiscent. The same face. Carmen's face. Her jaw, her brow, her eyes, her particular way of holding her mouth, all of it, arranged on a stranger's face across 17 feet of game show stage, looking back at her with no recognition at all. Carmen did not speak. She did not move. She stood at her podium while Steve Harvey finished the introductions, and the game began, and 307 people watched a game show. And she played 11 minutes of Family Feud while her entire understanding of her own life, quietly, completely, and irrevocably, came apart. The Family Feud studio in Atlanta had the specific warmth of a Monday afternoon in October, the season's light softer than summer, the audience settled and ready, the crew moving through the pre-taping sequence with the ease of long practice. 307 people filled the seats. Steve came out and the room went up, the way it always did, and he moved through the introductions with the particular warmth of a man who is genuinely interested in people and lets them know it. The Vega family was on the left. Carmen, 38. Her husband Marco. Her younger sister by adoption. Pilar's husband Tom's, and Carmen's college friend Deborah, making up the 5th spot. The Marsh family was on the right. Elena, 38. Her husband David. Her sister-in-law Cheryl. A colleague named James. And Elena's teenage nephew Brett, who had agreed to do this because his aunt had asked, and he could not say no to his aunt, which was the standard condition of being Elena Marsh's nephew. Steve worked both families. Warm, easy, the practiced spontaneity of someone who has done 10,000 introductions and still finds the specific person in each one. He came to Carmen. He asked the easy questions. Carmen answered them. Her voice was steady. She had a great deal of practice at steady. She had been steady for 22 years of carrying a photograph she couldn't fully explain, and she was steady now. On a game show stage, while the world rearranged itself around her. He came to Elena, He asked the easy questions. Elena answered with the particular warm directness of a woman who is comfortable in front of people. She taught 7th graders, which was its own form of daily improvisation. Steve glanced between them the way he sometimes glanced between contestants. He moved on. The game began. Steve would later call what happened next the most important moment of his career. Carmen Vega had been adopted at 3 days old from a hospital in Phoenix, Arizona. Rosa and Guillermo Vega, her parents in every way that mattered, every way she had ever measured, had brought her home from Phoenix to their house in Albuquerque, New Mexico, in a car seat borrowed from Guillermo's sister, and had loved her with the specific completeness of people who had wanted a child for 7 years and had been given one and intended to honor the gift in every daily act of their remaining lives. Carmen had known she was adopted since she was 4, told in the gentle, matter-of-fact way that child development specialists recommended, and that Rosa and Guillermo had carried out with care. It was not a secret, not a revelation saved for a difficult moment, but a simple truth woven into the fabric of how Carmen understood herself. She was chosen. She was loved. She was theirs. She had asked, once at 11 years old, why she didn't look like anyone in the family. Guillermo had the thick, dark brows of his father. Rosa had her mother's round face. Carmen's face was different, in ways she couldn't name. Lighter in structure, specific in the jaw, her eyes angled in a way that appeared in no family photograph on any wall of their house. She had sat with Rosa at the kitchen table and asked, the way 11-year-olds ask things they need the truth about, but also need to be protected from. How come I look different from everybody? Rosa had looked at her daughter for a moment. She had reached across the table and taken Carmen's face in both hands, the gesture she used for important things, the gesture Carmen still remembered at 38 as the feeling of being fully seen. She had said, "God just gave you your own face, baby." Carmen had looked at her mother's hands on her face. She had thought about this. She had said, "Is that why nobody looks like me?" Rosa had said, "Someday someone will." She had said it with a gentleness that Carmen had interpreted at 11 as comfort, and that she understood now, at 38, standing on a game show stage in Atlanta, as something closer to knowledge. Rosa had died 4 years ago. Guillermo 2 years before that. The photograph had come to Carmen the way all important things come eventually. Through loss, through boxes, through the sorting of a life into what gets kept and what gets released. She had found it among Rosa's things in a cedar box that also contained her own first tooth and a lock of hair from her first haircut, and a card Carmen had made in 2nd grade that said, "I love you, Mama," in purple crayon. She had looked at the photograph for a long time in Rosa's bedroom, in the quiet of a house that was now a house without Rosa in it, and she had felt, for the first time, with full adult awareness, that she was looking at something that was not simply a record of her own beginning. She had put it in her purse. She had carried it ever since. She had not known what she was waiting for. She knew, standing at the Family Feud podium, that she had been waiting for this. The game had been running for 11 minutes. Carmen had answered her questions. She had been present in the specific way of a person who is managing 2 realities at once: the surface reality of a game show and the interior reality of a foundational collapse happening in complete silence behind her face. She was good at this. She had been good at this her whole life, holding the question of herself in a quiet interior room while the exterior world required her participation. She had answered correctly, twice, and had listened to Elena answer correctly across the stage, and had heard, in Elena's voice, a cadence that she recognized from her own voice and had never heard in anyone else's before. She had watched Elena's hands on the podium and had seen them press flat in the gesture she made when she was concentrating, the gesture Marco had always found endearing, and that she had never seen in anyone else's hands. She had watched all of this and said nothing and played the game. And that wasn't even the part that made Steve cry. The fast money round. Carmen at the podium. The first 3 questions were clean. She answered without hesitation, her voice steady, her face composed. The 4th question arrived the way the 4th question always arrived. Routine, game show functional, designed to produce a warm answer that the audience could cheer for. Steve looked at his card. He said, "Name something a person carries with them everywhere they go that reminds them where they came from." Carmen's hands, which had been flat on the podium, went still. The room did not notice yet. Steve was looking at his card. The audience was looking at the board. Elena, across the stage, was looking at the question in the distanced way of someone waiting for her own turn. Nobody was watching Carmen's face except, possibly, Marco, who had been watching his wife's face the way he always watched it, with attention, with the specific readiness of someone who knows a face so well they can feel it shift before they can name what shifted. Carmen looked at her hands on the podium. She looked at Elena across the stage. She looked at her hands again. She reached into her jacket. She took out the photograph. She held it for a moment. Then she said, not loudly, not with drama, in the voice of someone who has just arrived at the end of a 22-year walk and is too tired to perform the arrival, "I need to stop." The studio fell completely silent. Steve looked at her. He looked at the photograph in her hand. He said, "Take your time." She said, I need to ask that woman something." She looked at Elena. Elena looked at her. Their eyes met across the stage for the first time in 11 minutes, really met, the way eyes meet when both people are suddenly paying full attention to each other. Carmen held up the photograph. She said, "Where were you born?" Elena's head tilted. She said, "Phoenix." "Why?" Carmen said, "What hospital?" Elena said, "St. Joseph's." "Carmen, what?" She stopped. She had used Carmen's name. She had been listening to the introduction. She looked at the photograph Carmen was holding. She looked at it from across 17 feet of stage, too far to see it clearly, but close enough to see that it was small and white-bordered and held in Carmen's hands with the specific care of something irreplaceable. She said, "What is that?" Carmen said, "It's a photograph. From the hospital. My adoptive mother gave it to me." Elena said, very slowly, "When were you born?" Carmen said, "March 19th, 1984. Elena said, "What time?" Carmen said, "I don't know. My records are sealed." Elena said, and her voice was entirely different now, was the voice of a woman standing at the edge of something. "I was born March 19th, 1984, at 6:47 in the morning, at St. Joseph's in Phoenix." She paused. "And my birth certificate says, it says there was a prior delivery, 40 minutes before me." But nobody in that studio knew what was about to happen next. Carmen Vega walked out from behind the podium. She crossed the stage. She stopped in front of Elena Marsh and held out the photograph. Elena took it. She looked at it. She looked at Carmen. She looked at the photograph again. She pressed her free hand flat against her chest, the same gesture Carmen made when she was managing something large. The same gesture, identical, discovered independently by 2 women who had never met. The audience saw it. The audience had already been watching, already had the specific stillness of people who understand that something real is happening and that their role is to not interrupt it. When they saw the gesture, both hands, same placement, neither woman aware that the other had made it, a sound moved through the room. Not words, the sound of 307 people feeling something they couldn't name. Steve Harvey set his cards on the podium. He took off his glasses. He pressed the bridge of his nose between his thumb and forefinger and stood there for a moment. When he looked up, his eyes were red and his jaw was set, and he was looking at two women standing in the center of his stage, with a photograph between them and the same hands and the same face in 42 years of a distance that had always been false. He said, "Stop the game." He pulled out his earpiece. He set it on the podium. He turned to the booth. He said, "This has never happened in the 27-year history of this show. I am stopping the game. Whatever comes next, we let it come." He walked to Carmen and Elena. He stood beside them. He looked at the photograph. He said to Elena, "Did you know?" Elena said, "I knew I was adopted. I never knew there was anyone else." She looked at Carmen. "Nobody told me." Carmen said, "Nobody told me either." Steve said, quietly, to both of them, "You've been looking for each other your whole lives without knowing you were looking." Carmen said, "I thought I was just carrying a photograph." She looked at Elena. "I didn't know I was carrying her." He pulled out his phone. He held it up so the room could see. "I am making a call on this stage during this taping, because some things cannot wait for after." He called the senior attorney of an adoption record unsealing organization his foundation had funded for 4 years, a specialist in Arizona's closed adoption laws, which had been amended in 2012 but contained grandfather provisions that kept pre-amendment cases locked in procedural review. He said, "I have 2 women in my studio, born Phoenix, St. Joseph's, March 19, 1984. One has partial records. One has a sealed file. I need an emergency petition filed for record access, and I need a DINA expedite through your partner lab." The attorney said, "I'll have the petition drafted by tonight. And I'll call the lab now. They can have a kit there within the hour." Steve ended the call. He looked at Carmen and Elena. He said, "By tomorrow, you'll have the confirmation. But I want to say something." He paused. "I've been standing here watching 2 women with the same hands and the same face and the same birthday stand across a stage from each other for 11 minutes without knowing. And I want to say to both of you that whatever the record says tomorrow, what I'm looking at today doesn't need a document." He turned to the families. Marco was standing at the edge of the Vega family position, with his hands clasped in front of him and his eyes doing something he was not trying to hide. David Marsh, Alina's husband, had crossed to the edge of his family's position and was looking at his wife with the expression of a man who loves someone very much and is watching something happen to them that is larger than anything he can stand inside with them. Steve said, to both families, "This is going to take time. What they're feeling right now, what all of you are feeling, takes time. I want you to give each other that time, starting today." But Steve wasn't done. He turned to the audience. He said, "I want to talk to everyone in this room and everyone watching at home about something. There are records that exist right now, sealed by laws passed before these women were old enough to walk, that kept this from happening for 42 years. 42 years. These women are 38 years old. They have lived their entire adult lives without each other. Not because of fate. Not because of chance. Because of a legal designation on a file in a courthouse in Arizona that nobody had the standing to challenge until today." He paused. "I need anyone watching who has a sealed adoption file to know there are attorneys and organizations that exist specifically to challenge these records. The tools are there. The laws have changed. What happened on this stage today is not a miracle. It is what happens when 2 people get close enough to each other and something finally gives. You can make that happen. You don't have to wait for a game show." He looked at Carmen and Elena. "Though I'm glad they waited for mine." Both families received the full prize. Neither family spoke about the game again. Elena's nephew Brett, 17 years old, who had agreed to come because he couldn't say no to his aunt, sat in his position at the edge of the stage for the remainder of the taping, with his forearms on his knees and his head bowed, and did not try to explain to himself what he was feeling, because he was 17, and some things are too large for 17's vocabulary. He would try to write it down that night in a notes app on his phone. He would get 3 sentences in. He would save it anyway. When the episode aired 8 weeks later, the clip of Carmen walking across the stage with the photograph was viewed 395 million times in its first 4 months. The hashtag "She Was Carrying Her" trended in 46 countries for 14 days. It reached #1 simultaneously in the United States, Mexico, Spain, the United Kingdom, and Argentina within 36 hours. 3 adoption rights organizations issued public statements citing the episode within the first week of its airing. Arizona's state legislature received a formal petition, signed by 340,000 people, requesting the removal of the grandfather confidentiality provision from the 2012 Record Access Amendment. The petition was the largest adoption rights petition in Arizona history. The viral moment did not merely trend. It moved. In the 6 months following the episode's airing, the unsealing organization Steve had called on stage processed 1,100 new case inquiries, the highest single-period intake in the organization's 12-year history. The partner Dina Lab reported a 280% increase in adoptee reunion test requests. 4 states introduced legislation to further ease closed adoption record access, citing the Carmen and Elena case in committee testimony. The Dina results confirmed what the photograph had already told anyone who looked. Monozygotic twins, 99,998% probability, same egg, same origin, same face. The sealed file was unsealed 4 months after the taping, under the emergency petition the attorney had filed the night of the taping. The file contained the name of their birth mother, a 20-year-old woman in Phoenix in 1984, who had made the only decision she believed she could make, and had requested confidentiality because she was not sure she could live with the alternative. Carmen and Elena discussed, privately and at length, whether to reach out. They decided together. The meeting, when it happened, was in Phoenix, in a coffee shop, on a Thursday morning. Carmen and Alana drove there together. They sat on the same side of the table. 8 months after the taping, the Own Face Foundation was incorporated, named for what Rosa had said to Carmen at the kitchen table when she was 11 years old. Its motto, taken from Rosa's words, "Someday someone will." In its first year, the foundation funded adoption record legal navigation, not testing access, and reunion counseling support for 2,900 adoptees navigating closed record systems across 31 states. 2 years in, 6,800 individuals served. Total investment to date, $20 million. The Foundation's legal team has successfully petitioned for record unsealing in 890 individual cases since its founding. Today, Carmen and Alana talk every day. They have developed, in 2 years, the specific shorthand of people who grew up separately and are now making up for lost time with a focused, deliberate intensity, finishing each other's references, sending each other photographs of things that remind them of the other, discovering in every conversation some new overlap in taste or habit or instinct that they cannot explain except by the fact of what they are. Elena came to Albuquerque in the spring and stood in Carmen's childhood kitchen and put her hands flat on the table. Carmen stood across from her. Neither of them said anything for a moment. Then Elena said, "I do this everywhere." Carmen said, "I know." Elena said, "How long?" Carmen said, since I was a child. Elena said, "Me too." Carmen looked at their hands on the table, the same hands, the same gesture, pressed flat against the surface in the same way for different reasons that turned out to be the same reason. She said, "I think we were always checking that the other one was there." Elena looked at her. She said, "Do you think that's actually possible?" Carmen thought about it for a long time. Then she said, "Rosa told me someday someone would have my face." She knew. So yes, I think it's possible. The photograph, the one Carmen carried for 22 years in the inner pocket of every purse she ever owned, sits now in a frame on the windowsill of Elena's living room in Savannah. Next to it, in an identical frame, is a photograph Elena found in a box of her own adoptive parents' things. The same baby, same hospital, same overexposed edges, same ancient expression of someone who has just arrived somewhere and has not yet decided what to make of it. Taken 40 minutes later. Same face, same beginning. Two photographs that have never been in the same room before, sitting side by side on a windowsill in Georgia, finally together, the way they always should have been. Some things are carried for 22 years because they are waiting for the right room. Some photographs are not records of the past, but maps to the future, showing you, in the overexposed light of a hospital morning, exactly who is out there looking for you. Carmen Vega pressed her palms against kitchen tables her whole life, because something in her body knew there was another set of hands somewhere, doing the same thing. She was right. She was always right. She just had to walk across a game show stage in October to finally find out. If this incredible story of two sisters who spent 42 years apart, kept that way not by chance but by sealed records and legal designations, touched your heart, subscribe to this channel and hit the like button. Share this with someone who believes it is never too late to find the person who was always meant to find you. Are you an adoptee who has been navigating closed records? Share your story in the comments, because, as Carmen and Elena proved, the tools exist, the laws are changing, and love does not have an expiration date.